It's time for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 19th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 25 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of 515 Fantasy Football. First things first, want to say thank you for checking us out, whether it's your first time or you've been with us since the very beginning. We greatly appreciate you giving us your valuable time. We promise to make it worth your while on a weekly basis. And by we, I mean me, Andy Hall, and my co-host, Brian Eikenberry. Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you this fine day?
I'm fine. I guess fine's the word of the day.
Fine.
Yes.
Fine is a fun word because it can be used as a descriptive word. You can use it to, gaff people off, so to speak. Like when your wife says, no, you need to do this. You're like, fine. And you just kind of walk away. Or you can be like, how is this? Well, this is a fine wine.
So there's a hidden meaning behind these things, though, I find.
Yeah. Or, yes, dear.
Fair is another word of saying fine. How's the state fair treating you?
I buried 3 of the hog legs in 2 days.
Aren't they awesome?
They are freaking amazing.
I had to do it. I'm not a huge turkey leg guy, not going to lie. It's similar to that, but this is pork.
Yeah, so I'm not a big pork guy.
Nice.
I'm always a turkey leg guy. And then I was like, you know what? I met the guy who runs it, and I'm like, let me try this. Let me just try this. And I did it naked. I don't put any of the sauces on it because I would rather just have it straight up.
Sure.
And then I bought another one. And then later on the next day, I bought another one.
So worth it. No matter how you found us, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, on the radio in Central Iowa at 1350 a.m., Brian and I give you several ways to connect with us personally. On Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. On Twitter, at 515 Fantasy. I'm on Twitter, at Andy Hall Radio. Brian is at IkeFFB. That's IKEFFB. We also have our own channel on the SleeperBot app. A must if you are a serious fantasy player. Our promise, as it's been since day one, you reach out to us for any reason whatsoever, we will dignify you with a response, which is more than we can say for a good percentage of the fantasy industry. We pride ourselves on the fact that we're not much different than you are. We love fantasy sports. We love people. We love having the conversation, the debate. Let's talk it out, friends.
I like turtles and snacks. You forgot those 2 things.
I did not. I wanted you to cover that.
Oh, thanks.
A slightly abbreviated show this week, but no shortage of fantasy goodness in the next hour plus. We'll recap preseason week 1, let you know if anything that transpired is worth a look. Also talk respectable reaches. Guys, you shouldn't feel bad about grabbing in your draft 1 round ahead of their current ADP. The ever-popular pop quiz upcoming will break down the massive girthy mock we did with the SleeperBot and SleeperWire crew last week later on. More on our inaugural Listener League. And we were fortunate enough to have Scott Fish on our show last week. Got a Fantasy Sports Hall of Famer joining us here shortly. But first, some headlines of fantasy note. We begin in Dallas. Dun, dun. We knew it was coming. Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott suspended for 6 games per the NFL's domestic violence policy. He has appealed. That's now up for review as of August 29th. Your thoughts? Do you think it'll be down to 4 or 5 games? Maybe less?
Absolutely not. I believe that the NFL cannot soften this stance. They cannot, especially with all the PR that's going on with the anthem stuff. They cannot soften their stance on this. There's no way, because if they don't, what is going to happen if coming back? Mm-hmm. How many anti-violence groups are going to come after the NFL about letting him off easier and all this stuff? So I don't think it's worth it, and too bad, Zeke.
We'll see what happens. If let's say it is 6 games, Brian, where do you knock him down in terms of running back rankings in PPR?
So In PPR, he's got to be down around 9 or 10 at that point.
I think he's even lower.
Yeah, I mean, the PPR changes a lot of it. If it's standard, I would say 5 or 6. To me, it really depends on your scoring system.
6 is a lot, man.
I know, and we talked about this. The way I would look at it is this. If I miss my first-round pick, can I go 3-3? Or actually, he would come back in week 8 because their bye week is 7.
There's a bye week in there, yep.
So he would be 8, so you would be 3-4 is what you would need to try and get to make it into the playoffs when he comes back.
Not that that's not doable.
Right.
You can cobble together a lineup. That's fine. But I think you're giving up so much of the season early on. I'm not knocking him down that far. Don't get me wrong. He's still a low-end running back 1, upper-end running back 2 for me. I wouldn't expect him to last past the second round in most drafts.
No, because I like to gamble. I like to have fun, and I would probably pull him if he slid to me in the first round.
We'll see what happens. Several big trades happened last Friday. In addition to the Zeke news, Twitter pretty much almost broke thanks to fantasy football. Wide receiver Sammy Watkins traded from Buffalo to the Los Angeles Rams. Jordan Matthews goes from Philadelphia to Buffalo. Now, speaking of Matthews, immediately upon arrival in Buffalo, he's now got what the team is calling a chip fracture in his sternum and is now considered week to week. Welcome to the team, pal.
Whoops. And also, did I not call Blunt last week? Was I not high on Blunt? And you're like, but he's going to have to split with so many people.
High on Blunt.
That was
nicely played.
That was neat. I didn't even
You
try.
You didn't practice that or
anything?
anything?
No, I didn't.
Speaking of LeGarrette Blount, reportedly he has not stood out in camp in Philly. They let Ryan Matthews go. So it's down to what? Is it going to be the aging Darren Sproles? Is it going to be this Pumphrey kid? Is it going to be Blount? Who's going to run the ball in Philly?
It's going to be LeGarrette Blount. No other option at this point. You just got rid of your option.
Can I go back to Buffalo for a second and Jordan Matthews? They just signed Anquan Bolden. Where does he thrive? In the slot.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does Jordan Matthews play the majority of his snaps, or where did he in Philadelphia?
Well, he played in the slot, but
in the slot. They have like an insane amount of slot guys in Buffalo.
Except for my super sleeper who just got promoted to the number 2 wide receiver.
And that is?
I don't remember.
It wasn't Zay Jones.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, that's the rookie?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do like Zay Jones anyway, but I just think that Buffalo's passing game, and this is going to hurt Tyrod Taylor ultimately, it's going to be a mess this year, though. The offense clearly runs through LaShawn McCoy.
Looks really tasty now.
No question, yeah. And I like his backup, too, Williams, because anytime, going back to Carlos Williams, going back to Mike Gillislee last year, somebody who backs up LaShawn McCoy will always get some production. So, he's going to be worth it no matter what. Jags first-round running back Leonard Fournette has a foot injury, which the team is taking very seriously and should, considering his history at LSU. He had foot problems back then.
Yeah, it definitely scares me a little bit. Repeat injuries, and that's really what it's about. And if it's already happening, that it definitely makes me think come draft day if I have to choose between him and somebody else.
No question. Wide receiver Marquis Lee survived a scare at practice last week when he was carted off the field with what ended up being a high ankle sprain, so nothing too serious. Dolphins running back Ajayi left the practice field last weekend following a lengthy concussion protocol, so a number of problems for Ajayi during camp. Colts owner Jim Irsay acknowledged that Andrew Luck's week 1 availability is in question, and for guys like T.Y. Hilton, you might consider knocking him down a peg depending on, I don't know, how much time you think Luck might miss. Maybe it'll just be week 1. At this point, I think that's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, I think it's going to be week 1, but look, he has a history now of playing injured and hiding it. So you never know what's going to happen, and I'm not comfortable with drafting Luck this year.
Nope, not me at all. Cardinals head coach Bruce Get Off My Lawn Arians says Jaron Brown, not John Brown, is currently the team's number 2 wide receiver. I'm not shocked by this considering John Brown's had all those problems with the sickle cell trait. Bucs rookie tight end O.J. Howard could be used primarily as a blocker, at least early on, according to a report from ESPN. Pass catching duties left to fantasy steal Cameron Brate, who, by the way, led the NFL in touchdown receptions at the position last year. I find it hard to believe, though, Brian, that a guy they take in the first round at pick, 19? I have a hard time believing they're just going to leave him in as a blocker, taking him that high in the rookie draft.
It's hard to believe unless he can't keep up.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Reports out of New York that Giants running back Shane Vereen will, quote, be a big part of the team's plans this season, unquote. This tells me they're not sold on Paul Perkins. Sources reporting the Chargers are looking at an October debut for first-round wide receiver Mike Williams, who suffered a herniated disc early on in training camp. That's good news, considering that looked like that could be a season ender. And from the hype department, Lions rookie wide receiver Kenny Gallaudet now officially working with the Ones, Brian. Nice call.
I told you so back in, May?
Right.
Nailed it.
Congratulations, pal. We have a great show for you, including a very special guest. I'm excited to get on these airwaves with us, a Fantasy Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer, Mr. Bob Harris of the Football Diehards, is with us next on 515 Fantasy Football. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on 1350 a.m. ESPN Radio. And, of course, we're available for your listen pleasure via Apple Podcasts and Google Play as well. Now, as many of you are aware, my quote-unquote day job is the afternoon drive host on a rock radio station called Laser 103.3 out of Des Moines, Iowa. Nearly 20 years into this crazy rock and roll circus, I've been fortunate, I've been blessed to work within a format featuring the music I grew up on and love. Specifically hard rock and heavy metal, I'm honored to be joined by a Fantasy Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer that happens to share my taste in music. So here to talk both with us is Bob Harris of the Football Diehards. Bob, first and foremost, thanks so much for sharing the airwaves with us.
Thanks for having me on, Andy. And again, it's nice to mix the things we love. I get to do it every day on my Sirius radio show. They allow me the leeway to enjoy my music, and I'm glad you're adding to that.
I heard a little Rain and Blood yesterday. Nice.
You will hear a lot of Rain and Blood on my show. It's reserved for special guests. So, yes.
I often brag, Bob, about this being my 25th year of fantasy football competition, but you've been at this for how long exactly?
1986. So this is my 31st year. I've been doing it as a job this is my 24th year of that. So,
wow.
It's been a while. I'm feeling exceedingly old at the moment.
Try not to, my friend. Try not to. Been a big fan of yours for a long time. Followed you on footballdiehards.com and on Twitter at footballdiehard. You were having a conversation about the greatest metal bands post Big Four, if I remember right. That's what got me involved.
Well, yeah, there's been, I get a lot of that. There's a lot of that goes on. And, it's such a hard conversation. It's like ranking fantasy players every year. As we sit down at Football Diehards to do our rankings, the first thing is you realize, wow, I can only get 10 guys in the top 10. There can't be 20. There can't be 30. There could be, but there can't be. There's only these arguments surrounding ranking the metal. And, as someone who plays music as well, you look at drummers and you look at guitar. All these conversations, they're just that. Everyone's ranking is subjective. It's based on kind of your individual taste, but it's always a fun conversation to get into, and I do it a lot.
I'm glad I jumped into this one for sure. I've devised a fun segment to allow Bob and I to hit on both fantasy football and heavy metal. I call it Fantasy Fusion, and here's how it works. For all the major fantasy positions, I'll give Bob a description that fits a specific band, and he gives me who he thinks is the fantasy football equivalent. I think this will be fun.
Yes, I agree.
We'll start at the quarterback position, Bob. How about a veteran that has achieved about all there is to achieve, an incredible back catalog, rarely, if ever, disappoints his fans, a real trooper, if you will? Who's the Iron Maiden at the quarterback position, Bob?
This was one of the easiest ones for me. It's without a doubt Drew Brees, year in, year out. Let's go back to 12th consecutive season. This year would be 4,800 yards, 32 TDs every year since 2007. Since he's been with the Saints and hooked up with Sean Payton, they've been kind of an unstoppable juggernaut. A lot of quarterbacks. I like maybe some guys that I would draft ahead of him if I had all my druthers. But for the price and the consistent production, much like Maiden, you have to go with Brees as a New Orleans Saint, and that dates back to 2006. He's been pretty much unstoppable.
Bonus question. Let's see if you can answer this. What's your favorite Maiden album?
Speak for of mind. It's not even close.
There you go.
Back in the early 80s, I am a long-time drummer. I've been playing drums for 40-plus years now. But at some point, you got to pick up a guitar, and I believe that was like the first album I learned, from beginning to end on guitar was Peace of Mind. So spent many hours with it.
It's incredible that band is still out touring and selling places out as they are. Iron Maiden is an unstoppable force, as I think you just described Drew Brees and Sean Payton.
No doubt about it. I mean, that's the thing you're looking for in fantasy, that consistent production. Look, we like the flash in the pans, the bands that show up and, give us that great tune or two. But, you can always fall back on the old reliable favorites.
Our next quarterback has been around a while, tends to be overlooked in comparison to his peers. A bit unconventional at times, but gets the job done more often than not. Armed and dangerous, you might say, is this quarterback. Who's the anthrax at the position?
I guess it would be, look, and you said unconventional, that threw me off. But it's Eli Manning, and he's kind of, I think he's unsung. He's won some championships, but they tend to surround him with some pretty good players, and I think that's the key. The same with an anthrax, whether it's John Bush or Joey Belladonna, the guys around him can help him carry him and have done a great job of that. So I'm going to go with Eli Manning and, throwing out the unconventional, though, because nobody's more conventional than Eli Manning, I believe, in terms of personality and his approach to the game. But in terms of his playing, I think he does tend to be overlooked in comparison to his peers. You could throw Phillip Rivers in that group as well, too. But I'm going to go with Manning at the top of that list, mostly because of the weapons around him.
Next is a real one-off. This quarterback is kind of all over the map like a roller coaster ride. Not everyone's container a chop suey. He's great when he's great, but there's always the feeling that he could at any point go off the rails. Who's the system of a down at quarterback?
I'm going to go with the guy who is alternately the red rifle and then the redheaded stepchild, Andy Dalton. You don't know which one's going to show up, right? I mean, there's been years where he's a top 5 QB. He's a fantastic player. He just doesn't show up all the time, oftentimes in prime time. Surge and the boys don't have that problem, but Andy does. I do love the weapons around him. In his career, where you've got a 5%, almost 6% touchdown rate. You've got guys like Tyler Eifert and AJ Green who are capable. I think this is going to be a red rifle year, but honestly, do you trust him? Do you know? Fortunately, you can draft him late, but definitely the up and down guy for me.
Matter of keeping everybody healthy on that offense, no question about it. Let's move on to the running back position, Bob. This guy ain't messing around. His goal is to leave any and all opponents in ruin. No surprises, no bells and whistles, just a head down, straight ahead, sometimes brutal player that knows his way to pay dirt. Who's the Lamb of God at running back?
He's relentless, but, when you think of Lamb of God, you bring in Chris Adler, and for me as a drummer, the technical proficiency, the precision, the technical aspect of the game. I'm going to throw a little of that in, and I'm going to go David Johnson because he is that relentless pounding assault. Look at the touches last year. Week 1, 15, then 22, 21, 30, 25, 41 with 33 carries, 17, 24, 29, 21, 27, 25, 16, 32. Look at the guy. Look at the usage of this guy. And you could make the argument for Le'Veon Bell here, but he's a little shiftier, right? Got the little jump step. That's not necessarily a Lamb of God move. David Johnson is just as quick to run you over as run around you. I'll go with him, and he will leave you in ruin.
A former UNI Panther here in our home state of Iowa. Up next is the vastly underrated running back. Not considered one of the elite, typically speaking. He usually plays second fiddle in the court of public opinion, but's a sneaky good sleeper you'll want on your squad. Killing it is his business. Business is good. Who's the Megadeth at running back?
You won't catch him sitting around with Lars talking to a shrink, but his name is Danny Woodhead. Woodhead, he's been a difference maker. Look at the Chargers offense. Had career high in yards from scrimmage and touchdowns, 9 in 2015 before he was hurt last year. Led all running backs with 80 receptions, 755 yards, and 6 touchdown catches. He goes to a team in Baltimore where, there's about 320 targets open this year. I think the one thing that people don't realize it's easy to overlook with him because you think of him as just a receiver. He's got a great nose for the end zone, and he's pretty solid in the goal line carries. He's one of 4 players to have at least 15 rushing touchdowns and 15 touchdown catches. since he entered the NFL in 2009. The other guys in that category, Jamal Charles, Matt Forte, Darren Sproles, they're pretty good.
Up next, he's been around the block more than a few times. This Iron Man may be on the downside of his NFL career, but because of his history and experience, you simply cannot ignore him come draft day. But beware, it all may come crashing down at any time. Who's the Black Sabbath?
Look, at 34 years old, it's Frank Gore, right?
Yep.
And the interesting thing, no running back has carried the ball more over the last 2 seasons than Gore. And he's so undervalued, it's easy to overlook him. And I would say Sabbath, in the modern day, kind of, look, the people who are into metal definitely know where the roots are. But it's so easy to overlook a guy like Gore, who in fantasy production has been a top 12 running back, both the last 2 years. And you can get him right now. He's like, the 35th running back on average draft position right now. He's a year older. He's already broken the age barrier, so to speak, for running backs, and that's a concern. But still, I think he's a guy that you can count on. One more year, this final tour, count on him.
You just don't want to be the guy that waits 1 year too long on Frank Gore. I think that's what everybody's scared about.
Yep.
On to wide receiver, Bob. You've got another thing coming if you don't believe this model of consistency is hell-bent for delivering the goods time and time again. A perennial first-round pick no matter what. This pass catcher is always locked into your starting lineup. Who's the Judas Priest?
I love him because he's never breaking the law either. Antonio Brown, look, he's the best receiver in the game right now. And I think the interesting thing about him is he's not the prototypical wide receiver one, right? He's not the guy you look at, the big body. Still, his first 7 seasons caught 632 passes, 8,300 yards, 13.3 yards per catch, has 50 touchdowns. That ranks pretty well since, 2000 and I'm using like 2005, 2011 is a baseline here because some of the guys fall into that. Antonio Brown ranks 6th in touchdowns. So you think of him as a PPR machine. He scores just fine too. Has at least 1 catch in 99 straight regular season games. And one of the great things about that is even if the Steelers are losing, they're trying to get him the ball because they're mindful of these landmarks he's hitting every year. And I think it's a big deal. It has most receptions in NFL history over any 4-year span of anybody since 2013 to 2016. He plays in one of the league's most prolific offenses. Ben Roethlisberger obviously has great trust in him. Having Le'Veon Bell on hand will help. Martavis Bryant comes back. This is a solid unit, much like Priest.
Now we're looking at the potential of a 6-game suspension for Ezekiel Elliott. Is Antonio Brown a guy that in like a PPR format you're okay taking at 3 overall?
Oh, yeah, I think that's how things are falling now. I'll say Ezekiel Elliott, I haven't seen him in the draft that I've been in since the suspension was announced. I haven't seen him fall out of round 2 yet. That may come, people are still hopeful. Optimism of the unknown, Andy, is a great thing, right?
No doubt.
There's still an appeal. We can still pull this off. Tom Brady put a suspension off a year. Maybe this, so he's still being drafted pretty highly. I'm laying off him a little bit more at this point. But I do think that Brown certainly moves ahead of him. And I think for some people, Odell Beckham falls into that range too.
Absolutely. Despite his legendary status, this disposable hero is hardwired to self-destruct due to the volatile nature of his game. Jump in the fire at your own peril. Sad but true. Who's the Metallica?
Let me just say, I saw Metallica last month in Detroit, and there has been no drop-off in their play. It was amazing, and Sad But True was one of the songs they played, and Jump in the Fire, and Hardwired to Self-Destruct. It was a great show. That out of my way. Look, Des Bryant, look, nobody has caught more touchdowns or has more touchdowns in that 2011-2016 5-year window than Des. But the problem is he's starting to, the wear and tear. And here's something I talk about from a fantasy perspective. I mentioned Antonio Brown doesn't fit the profile of the true prototypical wide receiver one. The 6'4", 230-pound guy that runs a 4.4, whatever. Well, there's a problem with that. It's called physics. The physics of the game are catching up with some of these guys, and I think Dez is one of those guys. Joints are only you work out a lot, you get bigger, you get stronger, but joints and bones are only meant to handle so much force and torque, and that seems to be an issue. Every time you see him leap up into the air to do a diving catch or whatever, you're worried when he comes down he's going to land too hard. He missed 3 games last year with a hairline fracture on his knee. It's been the foot before that. I just think he's getting to that point where it's a little bit of a concern. Still plenty of upside playing with Dak Prescott. He has 273 catches from 212 to 214. That's not bad. It's 41 touchdowns in that 4-year span, or that 3-year span. So, look, he's capable, but he worries me. And the price you're paying for him, that adds to the concern.
I'm looking forward to your answer to this next one. His greatness is masked by the players around him. He may not be the most talked about receiver in the league, but the truth is not many can match the frenetic energy this nameless entity can muster, and he can help you win a championship if you can identify him. Who's the Slipknot at wide receiver?
Because there's like 9 guys in Slipknot. This cannot be answered with one. I'm going 2, and I'm going to go with a standard scoring format guy and a PPR format. In standard format, it's Eric Decker. I think people don't realize what a great scoring threat he's been. He's easy to overlook. It's the mask he wears. It's a handsome mask, but it's a mask nonetheless. He ranks 9th in touchdowns overall, 52 touchdowns from 2011 through last year. That includes only a 3-game season last year. He goes to Tennessee. We all have high hopes for Marcus Mariota. The receiving core, Rashard Matthews, serviceable. Corey Davis, going to have to progress a little bit. Eric Decker is a guy to watch. He is a scoring machine. He's easily overlooked, and he should not be. And from the PPR perspective, equally easy. In New England, everyone's excited by Brandon Cooks. Everyone's excited. We know Rob Gronkowski's there. We look at the new weapons they bring in and all the guys they use out of the backfield. But Julian Edelman remains the game's most impactful slot receiver. He had another great season last year, 98 catches, 1,100 yards in the regular season. People are going to be concerned about those newcomers, and, there's always something sexier there. Cook would be the case this year. But Tom Brady, the thing about the Patriots is Tom Brady's trust is all important. And he still looks for Edelman whenever he's in trouble or he needs a play. So expect Edelman to have a huge role going forward, and the price is right on him. And he wears like a hair mask, is the beard.
You are right on with Julian Edelman. He is exactly who I had in mind for that answer, and I love the fact that you split it up into more than just one.
You have to. It's a big band.
Absolutely. Can you imagine splitting those royalties? Ugh. On to the tight end position real quick, Bob. A standout performer that might be a team player, but typically he's preferred to go solo throughout his career, mainly due to the fact that he's been caught in the middle of terrible teams. Tends to be overlooked because of that fact, but shouldn't be the last in line when it comes to draft day. Who's the Ronnie James Dio?
I'm going to go with I don't know that he has the same level of greatness. I mean, you're putting him on a huge level with Ronnie James Dio, right? But Delaney Walker is a guy. I mean, think about this. He is one of only, how many tight ends in history? He's the 9th tight end in NFL history to have a 90-catch season. That puts him in there with guys like Tony Gonzalez, James Witten, Todd Christian, Dallas Clark, Jimmy Graham, Ben Coates, Martellus Bennett, Rob Gronkowski. I just think he's easily overlooked because why? He's played in San Francisco and he's played in Tennessee. From a fantasy perspective, you can't get a more solid value than him.
Loud, fast, abrasive, an offensive weapon with which you'll always know what you're going to get. A player that'll show no mercy when he's healthy. Only drawback is that physicality does make him an injury risk. Who's the Slayer?
Oh, this one's easy. Turn it up to 69, man. It's Rob Gronkowski.
Yep.
I mean, when he's on the job, there's no one like him. I mean, there are not many 6'6", 265-pounders who beat safeties down the seam, make one-handed catches routine, leap over defenders, hurdling players, but the health is an issue. He goes hard and he goes fast, and it often costs him. But when he's on the field, much like Slayer, you cannot look away. You're intense. And I'm going to say Travis Kelce is kind of, if you're looking for the loud, fast, and abrasive angle on there, don't dismiss him.
No question about it. Finally, a tight end that has made steady progress over the course of his career. This sleeping giant is on the verge of a major breakout in 2017. Draft him in the later rounds and prepare to hit the mother load in fantasy production while the rest of your league mates stare into oblivion. Who's the mastodon at tight end?
I'm going to go with Eric Ebron, a guy who you can draft pretty late still. And we've all been waiting for the breakout. Look, Mastodon broke out for me years ago, I'm going to admit. So Ebron still has not achieved that status. I think the reason that you can hope that the catches have been there. He needs to stay healthy. But the reason that you have hope for him this year is his failure to score in previous seasons could be alleviated. Yes, Kenny Gallaudet looks like the real deal, but he is a rookie. Anquan Bolden's gone, and he was like the red zone target. Bolden finished second in red zone targets in all football last year, third in targets inside the 10-yard line. Some of those got to go to Eric Ebron. Some of them have to, and he will explode onto the scene.
So great. Bob Harris can be found online at footballdiehards.com, on Twitter at footballdiehard, and on Sirius XM's Fantasy Sports Radio with Mike Dempsey each and every weeknight evening, 5 p.m. Central, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That is correct.
Excellent. Bob, we should do this again, man. This was a lot of fun.
Dude, I can't thank you enough for allowing me to indulge in my multiple joys, and I appreciate that you appreciate that as well.
More of the 515 Fantasy Football Show still to come. Stick around. You're listening to 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Play, if you prefer.
We're on Patreon.
Yes, we are, in case you want to contribute that way to the show and get some really cool special perks that nobody else will get. Brian, it's time to recap week 1 of the preseason, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go through each of the games, give you the scores, and a couple of highlights from each that are fantasy relevant. So let's begin with Carolina 27, Houston 17. On the Panthers side of the ball, what I noticed most, and I had our first look at Christian McCaffrey, who had 7 rushes for 33 yards. And, didn't really flash a whole lot in this game. Had 1 run for over 10 yards in which he looked pretty good. But, I don't think there's any question that Christian McCaffrey is going to be a centerpiece of this Carolina offense this year.
No, I absolutely liked how it went. Just everything was good. There wasn't anything to make you stutter or stammer. He just looked good. There's no other way to put it.
You know who else looked good was Kelvin Benjamin. 2 receptions, 40 yards, a touchdown. Of note, Devin Funchess is the number 2 wide receiver in Carolina. For Houston, I was watching Deontay Foreman, the rookie running back, 9 rushes for 76 yards in spelling both Lamar Miller and your boy Alfred Blue. Deshaun Watson got some, and by the eye test, Brian, Deshaun Watson's the best quarterback the Houston Texans have. I'm sorry. I don't buy Tom Savage at all.
No,
he's just a guy.
Yeah. Again, pretty sure Deshaun Watson was my super sleeper there.
I like him a lot.
I think Savage will be out there for the first 2 or 3 games. They're going to let him lose the job to give it to Watson. That's my call.
Braxton Miller lined up as the number 2 wide receiver there in Houston, so that is of note. On to the next game. Dolphins 23, Falcons 20. Leonte Carroo, a reception for 33 yards and a touchdown for Miami. Cutler will make his debut in week 2. On the Falcons side, Matt Ryan went 3 for 3, 32 yards and a touchdown to Devontae Freeman, a 15-yard score. So Falcons already looking sharp right out of the gate. Vikings 17, Bills 10. Dalvin Cook. Had a lot of fun watching him work. Only 5 carries for 13 yards, but he did catch 4 passes for 30 yards. Now, Brian, if he's going to be involved in the passing game there in Minnesota, this
jackpot.
This is a workhorse back. It doesn't look like Latavius Murray is getting ready here in camp. He's still not practicing. Well, he might be practicing at this point, but he hasn't played. And then Jerick McKinnon, he's just a guy. So Dalvin Cook's looking like he's going to be a standout rookie running back in this league.
Yes, I agree, but I thought you were actually going to try and make the case for Keenum.
Oh, yes. We might actually have to do that again this year, just revisit the idea for, hey, you know what? Sometimes if you're writing for fantasy sports, sometimes you fall flat on your face, but at least you tried.
Yeah.
Sammy Watkins, before he got traded, 4 receptions for 39 yards. He was targeted on the first drive, traded the next day. How do you like that? Jaguars 31, Patriots 24. In this game, we saw Leonard Fournette rush 9 times for 31 yards and a touchdown, and talking about how easy the NFL is for him, and then he injured his foot the next day. On the Patriots side of note, Jimmy Garoppolo, 22 of 28, 235 yards, 2 touchdowns. Garoppolo's a guy, if you got Brady, you might consider actually handcuffing.
Why?
Because I think Garoppolo's in that offense, and he looks good. I think this is a guy that can step right in and maybe not be Tom Brady, but pretty damn close to it.
I guess, but
if you don't, think about it. You can just have the corner on that Patriots market. If anything happens to Tom Brady, why not take a flyer on Garoppolo? He's not being drafted anywhere else.
Yeah, I guess. It depends on how deep your rosters are. So I'd be okay with that.
If you were wondering who's catching passes out of the backfield for the Patriots, at least in week 1, it was Deion Lewis. 7 rushes, 32 yards. He also had 4 receptions for 23 yards. So that is interesting. Ravens 23, Redskins 3. In this game, we saw Terrence West go 5 carries, 23 yards, and a touchdown. No surprise there that Terrence West will be the lead back on early downs primarily, but Danny Woodhead will be involved, no doubt about it. There's an awful lot of opportunity there in Baltimore. The Skins really showed us absolutely nothing in this game and looked terrible doing it, so we'll move on. Cleveland Browns 20, Saints 14. Deshaun Kaiser, his first action, 11 of 18, 184 yards and a touchdown. He looked sharp. Apparently, this is going to be Brock Osweiler's job to lose in Cleveland, which shocks me. I thought it would be Cody Kessler.
Yeah, I did too, but look, they got Brock just as a hat tip from the Texans, kind of doing somebody a favor, I think.
Yeah, getting him out of that huge contract.
Yeah, so look, they're going to let him go just because he has real game experience. He's got it. So just, again, let him lose the job, then you can bring in Kaiser.
Here's what shocked me from the Saints side. In 2 wide receiver sets, we did not see Willie Snead at all. It was Michael Thomas. It was Ted Ginn, the outside guys. The only times we saw Snead on the field were 3 wide receiver sets. Now, granted, you will see a number of plays with 3 receiver sets for the Saints, but if he's off the field during 2 wide receiver sets, that's pretty significant considering where Willie Snead is being drafted right now.
Well, I think a lot of people forget how Willie Snead was absent for a couple of games, even more than a couple of games. He would have a big game, and then he'd be gone for 2, and he'd have a big game, and then an average game, and then he'd be gone for another 2. So that's the stuff I remember, their absences.
Broncos 24, Bears 17. Simeon and Lynch virtually identical as far as statistics go, although I will say in reports here in the past couple of days, it appears as though they're trying to give Lynch an opportunity to take the job from Simeon. D'Angelo Henderson, Brian, your guy, 7 carries, 54 yards, a touchdown. You know who he looked like out there to me? He looked like, who did he look like? Did you watch at all?
James Brown.
No, James Brown. He's got moves all the way down the field. No. Hey! He looked like Maurice Jones-Drew.
I don't know about that, but
I think he did. The way he runs, the type of he's like not a big tall guy. He's kind of stocky. He reminds me of Maurice Jones-Drew a little bit. And D'Angelo Henderson is a name you need to remember, no question. And that's funny considering I had no idea who he was last week.
You're welcome.
When Brian brought him up as a big sleeper. Benny Cunningham, 7 carries, 41 yards, a touchdown for the Bears. 2 receptions, 25 yards. Here's the thing about Benny Cunningham. They brought him in because Jordan Howard sucks at catching passes.
Yeah, very much so.
And we are going to see Benny Cunningham on the field. A lot of folks are taking Jordan Howard inside the top 10 at the running back position. Is that a bit of a risk considering Cunningham's going to be involved?
I think so because I think they're going to be playing from behind a lot.
I'm worried about Jordan Howard all of a sudden after watching that performance. Packers 24, Eagles 9. Nothing to report on the Green Bay side. Carson Wentz went 4 for 4, 56 yards and a touchdown to Mac Hollins. Bryce Tregg's a name to remember out of Philadelphia since I think they're still trying to figure out how that's all going to shake out outside of Alshon Jeffrey and Zach Ertz at tight end. But 7 receptions, 91 yards. I mentioned Bryce Treggs as a deep sleeper last year. Didn't pan out then, but it might here in 2017. We'll see. Pittsburgh Steelers 20, Giants 9. Juju Smith-Schuster had a rush for 9 yards and a reception for 4 yards, so get him on the field, the rook. And the Giants look very vanilla in this game. No surprise there, so nothing to report. Bengals 23, Buccaneers 12. Joe Mixon, 6 carries, 31 yards. We did see Jeremy Hill on the field quite a bit, 7 carries, 26 yards, so we know he'll be involved. Winston and Evans look sharp on the Buccaneers side. Ryan Fitzpatrick, the backup quarterback there in Tampa, had a rushing touchdown, and I think that's significant as the bearded one has had some pretty good years past few when he was a New York Jet. So in case anything happens to Jameis Winston, it appears as though Tampa's in pretty decent hands there. Niners 27, Chiefs 17. Joe Williams, a name to know. 7 carries, 60 yards in this game. I'm sold that Carlos Hyde's the number 1 for now, but any number of things could happen to Hyde. We know he's got an injury history, and Joe Williams is a rookie that I think looked pretty impressive in his first outing. Pat Mahomes for the Chiefs eventually will be the starter at quarterback. 7 of 9, 49 yards and a touchdown. Jets 7, Titans 3. This is going to be the Jets story all year long, man. They're not going to score any more than 13 or 17 points every week. Robbie Anderson, of note, 3 receptions, 71 yards along of 53. Nothing on the Titans side to tell you about. Rams 13, Cowboys 10. Nothing from the Rams, but McFadden was on the field. 6 carries, 28 yards. He did have a reception for 8 yards, and I do believe him over Alfred Morris, over Ronnie Hillman. McFadden's the guy to own if you're looking to cuff Zeke for that suspension. Cardinals 20, Raiders 10. Nothing from either side. Kind of a boring game. Lions 24, Colts 10. Kenny Gallaudet, man. 3 receptions, 53 yards, 2 touchdowns. Zach Zenner saw the field quite a bit. 6 carries for 26 yards. I do believe he could be a threat for short yardage stuff there in Detroit. Nothing from the Colts. And finally, the Seahawks 48, the Chargers 17. Eddie Lacy, 4 carries, 10 yards. Rawls, 2 rushes, 5 yards. Alex Collins, 6 rushes, 9 yards, and a touchdown. That offensive line is not good there in Seattle. Phillip Rivers looked sharp, 5 of 6, 56 yards and a touchdown. Travis Benjamin. Now, here's a guy I think is, you could grab him with the last pick of your draft, and who knows, this could be a steal for you. He's had some pretty productive seasons as of late. He had a couple of receptions in this game for 89 yards, a touchdown, a long of 74. Travis Benjamin, deep threat, San Diego, now Los Angeles. I can't get used to that. The LAC.
It's tough.
All I can think of when I see that is
Clippers?
Los Angeles Clippers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Isn't that weird?
No, I think the same thing. You're normal this time.
That does it for Week 1 recap. We're going to be watching Week 2 very closely as these training camp battles continue to be fought. Brian and I still have a lot to talk about in this episode of the show. Going to break down our Pro-Am mock with the Sleeper Bot and Sleeper Wire crews coming up. Going to hit Brian with 3 of Fantasy's toughest questions and the pop quiz upcoming as well. And we're going to talk about respectable reaches next. Guys that you shouldn't feel bad about reaching at least a round ahead of time for.
Your wraparound?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Reach around?
Next on 515 Fantasy Football. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. You can hear us on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa, each and every Thursday at 11 a.m. You can catch the show on Apple Podcasts, on Google Play, formerly known as iTunes and Stitcher. And for so many years there, I was, referring to them as that. So it's kind of confusing in a way to have to go Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
Rebranding.
Again, you can connect with Brian and I any number of ways. We're on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He is at Ike FFB. That's IKEFFB. Don't forget about our Sleeper Bot channel, 515 Fantasy Football. You can always connect with us there, and we have a Patreon as well. So in case you want to contribute to the show and help us
get exclusive content in your hands to help you win. Period.
Exactly. Be fantastic. Let's talk about what I call respectable reaches, Brian. These are we'll start with the 3rd round and go forward as far as we can. And guys that you shouldn't feel too bad about taking a round ahead of their ADP. And so we'll start with 3rd round. A guy that I feel like it's okay to reach for in round 2 is Aaron Rodgers. Listen, if you're going to spend that kind of draft capital on the quarterback position, okay, and you know me, I normally don't advocate for this sort of thing. I think there's a lot of value later on for quarterbacks. But Aaron Rodgers is potentially a difference maker. There's no question about it. The kind of numbers he's able to put up and capable of putting up, I think it's okay to reach for him.
Yeah, he's a quarterback who doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's probably going to get you 35 points a week.
So if you're in the 2nd round and you don't really like the receivers or the running backs where you're at, why not take an Aaron Rodgers there? And he is right now an ADP going in the 3rd round. A 4th rounder that you can reach for in round 3 and not feel too bad about, in my opinion, is Danny Woodhead of the Baltimore Ravens.
Not a chance.
Especially if you're in a PPR league.
Not a chance.
Brian doesn't play in PPR leagues. He doesn't believe in that. So Brian wouldn't agree with me here. But Brian, hear me out. No team in the NFL threw to their running back position more than the Baltimore Ravens the past 3 seasons. Okay? Danny Woodhead has been, we've seen his ceiling. It's top 5 in PPR. Okay? Granted, the floor is a little shaky because of the injury history and recent injury history, but Danny Woodhead is a sneaky good player, especially in PPR leagues. If you're in the 3rd round and you want to reach for a 4th round, a guy that's going 4th round right now, you want him on your team, take Danny Woodhead.
I adamantly disagree. However, I think his production will be there weeks 1, 2, and 3, and then when Dixon comes back, he's done.
See, I totally disagree with that.
So he's your candidate to trade high early.
Okay. So take that from Brian. If you're taking my advice, you're looking at my cheat sheet and seeing that Danny Woodhead's been up there in the top 20 easy. He's a guy that you might reach for. How about a fifth rounder that you can reach for in round 4? My candidate here is Julian Edelman of the New England Patriots. And again, I think this is going to assume some sort of PPR angle.
Yeah, I wouldn't even apply a PPR angle to that one. I'd be fine reaching for Edelman.
His red zone efficiency is not very good. It was just around 10% last year, but Julian Edelman's a guy who will probably catch 90, maybe 100 balls this year. He's a guy that has Tom Brady's trust. I don't care how many mouths there are to feed there in New England. Julian Edelman's going to get the ball.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I guess it really comes down to if you're a 12-team league too. That makes a big difference because that takes, what are we, 4th round? So that's 2, 4, 6, 8 more players off the board. So I would be okay with that reach.
A 6th rounder you can reach for in round 5. Now, I think this is one of the bigger steals at the wide receiver position, considering his current ADP, is Denver's Emanuel Sanders. He's kind of a forgotten man at the position, but just remember, this is a guy that perennially is a threat for over 1,000 yards receiving, between 7, 8, 9 touchdowns a year. I like Emanuel Sanders a lot, despite the fact that they've had troubles at quarterback.
Emanuel Sanders will not get past me in that position. I guarantee it.
In round 5?
Yeah.
Very cool. So you agree with me for a change.
I do.
7th rounder you can reach for in round 6. Now, again, this is going to be another case of forgotten man syndrome, but only because he's 34 years old. He's Frank Gore. I mean, Frank Gore is still the number 1 running back in Indianapolis with virtually no competition there, aside from a rookie and Marlon Mack and maybe one other guy that I can't even tell you who it is right now. But Frank Gore is perennially a guy that gets you about 1,000 yards rushing. He'll catch some balls as well. He'll score some touchdowns, especially with Andrew Luck out, and we don't know for how long. They're going to lean on Frank Gore as long as they can. They're going to ride him till he dies.
Yep, and again, I agree with you. He will not make it past me in that kind of a position.
You and I both, my friend, and it doesn't matter what. This is standard PPR, whatever. 8th rounder you can reach for in round 7, in my opinion, is Washington running back Rob Kelly. Now, he's still got that job there in Washington. That offense might be more of a pass-heavy offense, but I don't think there's any risk whatsoever, at least for the time being, of Samaje Perine stepping in and taking Rob Kelly's job. Now, this is a guy you can get super late, and he's a starting running back in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely, and Perine looked terrible.
He lost a fumble.
Yeah.
Not good.
And that's not good for rookies.
9th rounder you can reach for in round 8. My candidate here is Seattle's C.J. Prosise. Now, again, I'm going to give you the caveat here that this is mostly for PPR, half PPR, full PPR. C.J. Prosise is a guy that when he was given the opportunity to be the feature back before he got hurt, he looked like dynamite, even behind that terrible Seattle offensive line. You know he's going to catch passes. He's an elusive runner who's got a little bit of oomph to his motor. C.J. Prosise is a guy I wouldn't feel bad about reaching into round 8 to grab.
I won't disagree, but I won't agree either. I'll push on this.
It's a crowded backfield, man. I mean, Thomas Rawls, he's going to get the job. I think Eddie Lacy is a huge bust, in my opinion, at where he's at in ADP. So, but he does keep falling, too, to be fair. So, initially, where people were taking Eddie Lacy was absolutely insane, in my opinion. I like C.J. Prosise a lot. 10th rounder you can reach for in round 9, Corey Coleman. What do you think of Corey Coleman in Cleveland, Brian? Somebody's got to catch passes there.
Yeah, I apply they're going to be playing from behind, and the interceptions don't count against your wide receiver.
Nope.
So if it's a team that's going to have to throw 40 to 50 times a game, I'll take any wide receiver on that team.
Now, I like Kenny Britt as well. He's going even later than Corey Coleman, but I think Corey Coleman's kind of a steal where you're able to get him right now in the 10th round in ADP. An 11th rounder you can reach for in round 10, in my opinion, is Rashard Matthews of the Tennessee Titans. Here's a guy that been Mr. Consistency for the past couple of seasons. He even flashed when he was in Miami there for a time. Yes, they signed Eric Decker to a contract, and Decker's a great receiver. Yes, they have the flashy rookie Corey Davis, but I think Rashard Matthews is a guy that just time and time again can get the job done, and especially at that price in the 11th round, I wouldn't feel bad about taking him in the 10th if he was there.
Yeah, I agree. I think he is one of those guys where he's a great bye week fill-in for your starting roster. He just kind of floats around for 3 weeks for your starters, and then you just kind of let him ride the bench in case of injury.
Quick segment, my friends. That's the end of the respectable reaches. Maybe we'll revisit this before the end of the preseason. Brian, I'm itching to get to that pop quiz, so we are going to do that next. 3 of Fantasy's toughest questions coming at Brian minutes from now. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. You're hearing it on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry.
Meow.
And we are also found on Apple Podcasts /iTunes, Stitcher /Google Play. Lots of ways you can find us and connect with us. Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. Twitter, @515 Fantasy. We're on Patreon. We're on the SleeperBot app. We have our own channel there. Lots of different options in case you ever want to reach out to Brian, myself, or the both of us. We're there for you, my friends. And especially if you're a Patreon, we're really there for you.
Really there
Lots
for you.
of cool content that you can get nobody else can. So look into that at Patreon. We have our own site there. Just search for 515 Fantasy Football. Brian's favorite segment, the pop quiz.
It is indeed, because I never lose. That's why.
So we might as well just call it I Win then, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. 3 of Fantasy's toughest questions. Brian doesn't know what I'm about to ask. He hasn't prepared for it at all. I just love throwing tough questions at Brian and letting him just hit us with all his fantasy knowledge. And then I come back and tell him why he's wrong. So that's how that works. Question number 1, Brian. You ready?
Ready.
3 NFL teams featured 2 wide receivers that finished top 15 or better in half PPR leagues last year. Green Bay had Jordy Nelson at 3, Davante Adams at 8. New Orleans had Brandon Cooks at 7, Michael Thomas at 10. Oakland had Amari Cooper at 11, Michael Crabtree at 12. Will even one NFL team achieve the same feat in 2017? And if so, who?
We need like some background music. So that's perfect. Yes. I think out of those, I will go with New England.
Interesting. You think 2 New England receivers in the top 10 or top 15 at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So you think it's going to be
why.
Cooks and Edelman, obviously.
Well, you got Brady's going to have a full season. No, I don't.
Who else? There is nobody else.
If Gronk stays healthy all year, it'll be Edelman and Gronk.
Yeah, but that's not wide receiver. He's a tight end.
Wink,
I know in your
nudge.
league you don't like tight ends. I get that.
Wink, nudge. But yeah, you know what? Fine. I'll even take Cook's deal on there. I will take New England is my answer.
Okay. Now, the answer to the first question is yes, there will be at least one. Only one team had 2 wide receivers in the top 14 in 2015. That was Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker of the Jets. 2 in 2014, Demaryius Thomas, Emanuel Sanders of the Broncos, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb of the Packers. 2 in 2013, Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey of the Bears, Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Broncos. And 2 in 2012, Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Broncos, Julio Jones, Roddy White, Falcons. Typically, we've seen at least one, usually 2 teams feature 2 wide receivers in the top 12 at the position. This year, I'm banking on that tandem being Jordy Nelson, who I've ranked at 6, and Davante Adams, who I've ranked at 15.
I don't think Davante Adams is the answer.
Why?
Because he's terrible.
You think Martellus Bennett's going to steal those? Ty Montgomery's going to steal those?
Ty Montgomery, yeah.
I think Davante Adams is solid.
Okay, you draft him then.
I will. If he's there, man, I am all about taking Davante Adams, even though he's the second wide receiver, clearly second wide receiver. But if there's going to be a tandem in that top 15 or whatever, I just honestly, I think it's the Packers. I think it's got to be. Because you look at basically like who are the most likely candidates at quarterback to have that sort of production where you can have 2 receivers there. And you look at the Saints this year, and it's like, well, aside from Michael Thomas, I don't know. Ted Ginn, probably not. Then you have like New England, like you said, and I think Gronk is in the mix there, but he's not a wide receiver, so that actually kind of hurts the Patriots' chances of having 2 in the top 15.
I think the Patriots made a grave mistake with their running game, and it's going to force Tom Brady to throw the ball a ton this year.
It could be. I mean, what else is left for Tom Brady? He's won all those rings and everything. It's all those statistical records. That's what he wants now.
He
might throw 60 touchdowns this year. We don't know.
With that, ever since Randy Moss, he's never been one of them big statistical kind of guys. Mm-hmm. So, he's never been a Matt Stafford.
Here's a sneaky one. If Andrew Luck can get his health together, then there can be a possibility of like a T.Y. Hilton and a Dante Moncrief, maybe.
Yeah, I could see that just because Gore's an old and crusty and their defense sucks.
Or how about Pittsburgh? If Martavis Bryant can keep his nose clean, could be an Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant deal.
Not too good of a running back there.
All right. So there you go. I think it's going to be the Packers. Brian disagrees. He says Patriots, which is an interesting answer.
They both start with the same 2 letters.
True. Question number 2, Brian. Is Marshawn Lynch worth his current ADP as the 21st player, the 12th running back off the board in half PPR leagues?
I say no. You say yes.
You already know that I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
So is that going to be your answer here just so you can be right?
No, I'm going to say no because I know I'm right.
Actually, you're not right. Last year's running back 12 was Frank Gore. He finished with 194 fantasy points. In 2015, it was Mark Ingram with 177. In 2014, LaShawn McCoy with 182. On average, over the past 3 seasons, the running back 12 finished with roughly 184 fantasy points. To get there, Lynch would have to be a 1,000-plus combo yard back with at least 12 rushing scores. Guess who did that in 2016? Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray.
Well, he's way better than Marshawn Lynch is now.
Oh, that's so wrong. FYI, behind the same offensive line in the same offense, and he only rushed for 4 yards per carry, Brian. The answer is yes. Lynch is potentially every bit as good as Murray. In fact, I'd argue better. Plus, this Oakland Raiders offense as a whole is far and away better than anything he ever had in Seattle, quite honestly. I have no doubt Lynch will reach at least 1,000 combo yards, score at least 12 touchdowns, making him worth his current ADP with the potential for more.
We shall see.
At least I have good reasoning behind it. You know, I'm crunching numbers here.
I'm not disagreeing with your technique.
But I'm not changing your mind.
No.
Okay. Well, maybe there are some out there that were doubting him, and maybe I just threw those numbers out and they went, oh, that's worth a look. If Latavius Murray can do it behind that offense.
Latavius Murray was awesome.
Latavius Murray is a very average back in the NFL. 4 yards per carry, dude. Come on.
Not his fault.
Average. Why? Whose fault is it?
Well,
the offensive line is elite. It's
what's
not
his
their
yards
fault.
after contact?
Terrible.
No. Through the roof.
Was it?
Yeah.
Do you know that off the top of your head?
No,
You're
just
lying
lying.
through your teeth right now. God, I hate it when you lie because I can't tell. All right, question number 3 quickly. Sammy Watkins was traded from Buffalo to Los Angeles. He's now a Ram. Will Sammy Watkins finish 2017 as a wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 2, or none of the above?
None of the above. He will be injured again.
See, it's tough to predict injuries, though.
Not when you do it all the time.
Okay. In order to finish as the 24th wide receiver in half PPR leagues, you'd have to do what Jameson Crowder did last year. 67 receptions, 847 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns. In his rookie season in 2014, Watkins caught 65 passes, 982 yards, 6 scores. And those stats over a full 16 games, the one and only time Sammy has played every game. He played 13 back in 2015, over 1,000 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns. You're really banking on him staying healthy in order to have a shot at being a wide receiver 2 for your fantasy squad. His ceiling is incredibly solid, but his floor is really risky, as you mentioned, Brian, due to injury, and maybe a bit due to a mostly inept Rams offense led by second-year quarterback Jared Goff, who was flat-out terrible last year. My bet is no on this. Sammy Watkins will finish outside of the top 24 at wide receiver. My most recent rankings at ESPNDesMoines.com, I have him at number 31 at the position. You did reasonably well. I just wish you'd come around on the Marshawn Lynch deal.
I'm not. I am not drafting Marshawn Lynch.
I love his ceiling in that
My
offense.
bones are aching on it. My trick shoulder's freaking out. I can't do it. It's like a voodoo curse or something.
I think taking that time off was good for Marshawn Lynch, and I think he'll come out fresh. I really do. And we already know that the Raiders are going to run the ball when they get down near the goal line. They made a joke out of it, of course, making reference to the fact that the Seahawks tried passing on the 1-yard line and got screwed out of a Super Bowl title.
Yes,
to the
indeed.
New England Patriots. So we know that they're going to run the ball, and then when you have a Marshawn Lynch, that's what you do with him. But I think there's a lot more to his game, too. I think he's always been an underrated pass catcher as well. There's really nobody else there. DeAndre Washington, kind of the only guy. Jalen Richard, I guess. Those are just guys, though, Brian. I mean, Marshawn Lynch, this is going to be a good offense. I just think there's all kinds of opportunity there, and I don't know. Still not going to sell you on it, obviously.
Nope.
It won't stop me from trying, though. All right, so Brian and I are involved in a Pro-Am with the Sleeper Wire guys. It's pretty cool, actually. Looking forward to the draft coming up here in about a week and a half. Mock results. We did a mock with them, and I'm going to go over how it went, and Brian and I are going to talk strategy as we look to actually do the real deal coming up here very soon. So that's next, the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. The 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're on Apple Podcasts and on Google Play as well. Lots of different ways to hear the program and lots of ways to reach out to Brian and myself as well. Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, SleeperBot, lots of cool stuff going on there. Brian, we did a mock draft, or I did a mock draft.
You did, yeah.
Yes, I
was like busy playing Call of Duty or something, I think.
You might have been. So we're involved in this Pro-Am, which we're really excited to be a part of this year with the Sleeper Wire crew. If you haven't checked out their podcast before, really cool guys and very entertaining show. And they do it for charity. So there's a charity angle involved here, which makes you all the more happy to be a part of something like this. But anyway, we did a mock draft with a bunch of quote-unquote experts, analysts, podcast hosts, all kinds of different folks. What was it, about a week ago. And we were the fourth pick. It was a random draw, PPR league. Standard format as far as like starting lineup goes, not a 2-quarterback league, anything fancy like that. We got the fourth pick though, and as expected, and this was before the Zeke news came down. So first 3 picks went David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott. So of course, and that again, this is before that all came down. Things probably would have changed drastically had he not, or had that news come down, after the fact.
Do you have who picked him?
Yes.
Who picked him?
Somebody named BFT Geo.
I don't know.
Break from the grind?
Maybe.
That would be the break from the grind guys.
Weirdos.
So we were the fourth pick. So who did I take, do you think, at number 4 in PPR? You know me very well, so I'm just going to
Danny
let you
Woodhead?
guess.
No,
Woodhead.
just kidding.
Shut
Ha!
up.
Antonio Brown.
Yes, about as safe a pick as you can get. And now that Zeke's been suspended for 6 games, if that sticks, which you think it will and I think it will, and we heard this from Bob Harris from the Football Diehards earlier in the show as well, Antonio Brown is a perfectly good number 3 pick overall in PPR. Even in standard, I might consider him there as well, Brian. So we took Antonio Brown with our first pick. The rest of the first round went pretty much as expected. And then around came the second round, and we had the 21st pick. And at that point of the draft, I had my choice. I could have taken a Doug Baldwin, a DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen, Demaryius Thomas. Isaiah Crowell was still on the board at that point, Lamar Miller, Marshawn Lynch. I decided to grab Rob Gronkowski there in the second round.
Attaboy.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot there, and I'm surprised people let him slide as far as they did. Some of the guys that went ahead of Rob Gronkowski are not guys that are potentially dominant at their position. So right off the bat, I've got the consensus number 1 wide receiver and pretty much the consensus number 1 tight end in our first 2 picks. For our third pick, I came around. It was a short wait for that third pick, and still on the board was my boy, Marshawn Lynch. So I took him as our number 1 running back, and that's something I know you'll disagree with vehemently, but compared to some of the other options there at that point, I just thought Marshawn Lynch offered the probably the highest ceiling. And if he does pan out, Brown, Gronkowski, Lynch, first 3 picks. You could do a lot worse than that, I suppose. Fourth pick came around. Now, this is where I went unconventional, Brian. You know me as a guy that I tout it time and time again to wait on quarterback. But here we are. It's tail end of the 4th round, and Tom Brady's still sitting there.
Oh, I would have yanked it in a heartbeat.
Guess what? I just took Tom Brady to pair up with Rob Gronkowski.
To pair up with Gronk's 27 touchdowns.
How do you like that stack, Brian?
Yep.
I did the unconventional. I actually took, and it felt good to take a quarterback at overall pick number 45. I thought that was a steal. So that's what I did.
When his name is Thomas Brady, yeah.
Like it a lot. So our 5th pick, I had to take a running back. Unfortunately, Danny Woodhead got taken right in front of me, so I targeted Carlos Hyde of San Francisco. I think he'll get a lot of work there. The team knows they're terrible. They're not going to try to be in any games. Carlos Hyde is unquestionably, for now, the guy there in San Francisco. So I took him as our running back, too. And next round came around, and there's Adrian Peterson sitting there. And I thought to myself, here's another guy kind of like Lynch, where we don't really know what's going to happen here, but he could score a ton of touchdowns. And I kind of like touchdowns in fantasy football.
Look at it this way. Your running backs are fresh.
No question about that. So I got Lynch, Hyde, and Peterson as our 3 wide receivers in the first 6 picks. Tom Brady I took in the 4th, Rob Gronkowski in the 2nd, Antonio Brown in the 1st. I think we're shaping up pretty good here so far. In the 7th round, I took Emanuel Sanders, a guy we talked about earlier as a respectable reach. So at pick number 76, I'm more than happy to have a guy like Emanuel Sanders on our squad. Doubled up at the tight end position, or at the wide receiver position, with our next pick in the 8th round and took Dante Moncrief, another upside player I just mentioned in the last segment, as a guy who could definitely impress a lot of people. How do you like our team so far?
Pokemon Moncrief.
Yeah, Pokemon Moncrief. That's right. Got to catch them all. In the next round, I took yet another wide receiver, another upside, and Cameron Meredith, who's done some things there in Chicago. And really, I can't think of anybody else. Kevin White, I mean, he hasn't done anything yet. Cameron Meredith's going to be kind of the guy there for whoever throws the ball for Chicago.
I liked him a lot at the end of last year, too.
Yeah, and in the 9th round, that's not bad. My 10th round pick is another starting running back. It's Jonathan Stewart of the Carolina Panthers, and another guy that might not get as much play as he used to. He might score some touchdowns, though, considering they don't want to run Cam Newton too much down near the goal line anymore.
Yeah, and he's a starting running back.
Took our backup quarterback in the next round, the 11th, and Ben Roethlisberger's our guy. I'm targeting him because I own Antonio Brown and because I really like how he plays at home. So if we do end up starting Ben in any games over Tom Brady, it might be because Ben's playing at home. My next pick was Sterling Shepard, wide receiver of the New York Giants. I think this kind of depends on what Brandon Marshall's going to do in that offense. We've seen what Shepard can do. He was a great rookie last year, and we know what Odell Beckham is as well. So
yeah, so I actually like this one a lot because I don't think the run game is going to get any better in New York, and will always be crap, and it'll be 3 wide receiver sets.
My final 4 picks were tight end Austin Hooper, who I think will have a really great season there in Atlanta, and he's a big sleeper at the tight end position for as late as you can get him. I also took Chris Thompson of the Washington Redskins as a running back flyer, guy that's going to catch some passes in a PPR league. I took Alan Hearns, the second to last pick from Jacksonville, and this was at the time in reference to the news that Marquis Lee had gotten hurt. We didn't know the severity just yet, but Alan Hearns was a guy I grabbed as a flyer. He's had some double-digit touchdown seasons. And my last pick was James Conner, Pittsburgh Steelers backup running back. Let's say something happens to Le'Veon Bell. James Conner, he's a rookie, but he's going to step in there behind that offensive line and on that offense and make some noise.
Away he goes.
So we might as well just name ourselves the Steelers with the Antonio Brown, the Ben Roethlisberger, and now a James Conner pick. But that's our team. The sleeper wire guys, I just want to make mention of this real quick, kind of ripped our team apart. They were doing some live commentary, and I went back and listened to it later. I wasn't listening to it when I was drafting. They kind of ripped my team apart. They didn't like it for whatever reason. But then this one of the guys that's involved in this mock, and he's involved in our Pro-Am as well, he's got a pretty cool analyzer tool, and his analyzer ran our draft basically and picked us as the highest scoring team.
Imagine that. We have those top studs in a couple of positions.
I don't know what the sleeper wire guy's beef was. It's probably a personal thing. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't like the players that we took.
They're jealous.
Or they're jealous. That could be too. Their team isn't nearly as good as ours. So there you go. There's a little trash
Haters
talk.
gonna hate.
Little trash talk. Yeah, we'll see what happens when we get to the Pro-Am. Again, we're going to be actually drafting that team on Wednesday next week, the 23rd.
Is it?
Yeah, you should know that, Brian.
Oh, we're going to be drafting and we're doing a show, I guess, huh?
Yes, we're going to be doing a show and drafting a team, which will be very exciting.
Great. Can't wait.
Yeah, so happy to be part of the Sleeper Wire Pro-Am this year, no question
I should
about
probably
it.
sign in.
We only have one segment left, Brian, only one, and it is our final segment of the show, entitled the 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker, in which Brian and I get to stretch out and talk about any number of things. You want to give us a quick primer as to what's on your mind?
Apologies and overhype.
Apologies and overhype. I don't have to apologize to you, just for the record, do I?
No.
Oh, that's good. Whew.
Woo.
Thank God, because I'm not all about apologizing to you right now. So we had our disagreement. I'm still a little heated about the Marshawn Lynch thing, but
Yeah.
that might be our biggest bet of the season. What do you think?
Yeah, I pretty much have won any bet we've ever done, so sure.
That's not true.
That's very true.
It is not true at all. Don't listen to him. If this is any indication, this Sleeper Wire Pro-Am mock that we did, that I'm willing to take Marshawn Lynch as my number one running back, I mean, I'm banking on the guy this year. I really am. You know?
Sounds like it.
See what happens. We'll talk more about just whatever we want in the Flea Flicker next. 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. Final segment of this 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're on iTunes / Google Play or / Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher / Google Play. We're on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. He's at IkeFFB. That's IKEFFB, Brian Eikenberry. I'm Andy Hall, at Andy Hall Radio on Twitter. Please find us on Patreon. We have some really cool perks up for grabs if you're interested in contributing to the show. Brian?
Yes, I agree. Just run down the list real quick of what you can get. If you do head over to Patreon, search 515 Fantasy Football. The first level is your early bird. You're going to get the bargain bin picks from Andy and Brian. That's us. Full 24 hours in advance, so you can head out there and beat your friends to the punch on your waiver wire. The second tier is your Sunday morning starts and sits. You get early access, private access, 1 hour before kickoff on Sundays, so we can answer your quick start and sit questions. Then your third tier is a Saturday night special. You get the early bird, you get the Saturday morning or Sunday morning sit and starts, and we'll overhaul your roster. We'll analyze and overhaul your roster, look for weaknesses, bye weeks, things coming up that you're probably not seeing. We're going to look 2 weeks ahead and say, bro, you've got like 3 people off on bye weeks. You need to pick up some wide receivers before we get into everyone else's bye weeks. So think ahead. Let us overhaul your roster.
Another thing I want to talk about real quick before we dive into the flea flicker and whatever we want to talk about, of course, Brian, is the fact that our 515 Fantasy Football Listener League, the inaugural, is happening this year, and we are looking for entrants. We have one thus far. Rob Nauman will be invited officially into the 515 Fantasy Football League. We threw it out last week. If anybody jumped on Patreon, and whoever became our first Patreon would get an automatic invite, so Rob gets one of those, and I'm happy to hear that too, because Rob is one of the original listeners of this show. He's been on board since day one. But Brian, they need to let us know they're interested.
Yeah. Look, hey, this is all about wanting to participate, wanting to be active. We don't want to pick some slough who shows up for 2 weeks and quits the league.
Or doesn't even show up for the draft period in auto drafts.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. So you need to be there. You need to be aware. It's not going to be some crummy time like 9 a.m. It's going to be nice evening. We've all got families. We're going to be very conscious of those things when we pick the draft times.
Yeah, we're definitely not going to do like a Wednesday at 6 p.m. Wink, wink.
Wah.
Anyway, so Brian and I are in the process of figuring out exactly we're targeting, and maybe this is what people were waiting for, Brian, to find out when the draft is.
Yeah, because I don't even know. I should probably change that.
We'll figure that out, and we'll certainly get back to you on it. But if you're interested, make sure to hit us up on Facebook, on Twitter, all those places I just mentioned a bit ago. Brian, it's the flea flicker, and the thing I want to lead with is a cool phenomena that is going to happen in our skies on Monday. It's going to get pretty dark during the day here in Des Moines, Iowa. If you're down in Kansas City, Missouri, that's kind of like the place to be.
Yeah,
midday on Monday with the lunar eclipse.
Yeah, it'll be 100% down there. But for us here in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa specifically, we're going to be at 93%.
Which is awesome.
So that's pretty darn close. I'm probably just going to lay naked out on my lawn.
I kind of like, the fact that I can just step outside and for a period of time. Now, I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to last.
It'll be lengthy, man. I mean, it's not going to be like an hour, but I think
half an hour?
Yeah, I think so. For the majority of it, it's going to be pretty dark for a good 20 minutes, I think.
And this is the moon passing between us and the sun, right? Isn't that?
I thought it was the Death Star.
Ooh.
Well, this is stupid.
It's even more exciting.
The Death Star eclipse. I was excited. Now I'm just disappointed.
When I said lunar, you would think that would mean moon, right?
Well,
okay.
That's no moon. That's a base.
That's a space station. I love that movie. And I got to go back and watch those again. The originals. Nothing like them.
Watching them with Benny right now. It's great.
Lovely. That's a parenting win, Brian.
He's 4.
Give me a freaking high five.
So the best part is,
dude.
like, you can teach them life lessons when they're watching this.
For sure.
So when we're out watching episode 3, and at the very end when Anakin's getting burnt, spoiler alert, when Anakin's getting burnt in the lava after Obi-Wan chops his legs off, Benny's like hiding his eyes, and I'm kind of thinking like, whoops, this was a fail. He's like, why is he burning? I'm like, that's what happens when you touch the stove. Mm-hmm. When Daddy tells you, don't touch the oven, don't touch the stove, it's hot, that's what's going to happen. So don't touch it. And still, to this day, this is probably 4 months ago we watched episode 3, he does not even go near the stove because he thinks he's going to get set on fire.
Did you start him with episode 1?
Yeah, we just went all the way through.
That's borderline child abuse, Brian.
He's 4.
That's borderline child abuse, and you know it.
No, because he connected with young Anakin.
What shirt are you wearing tonight?
A Star Wars shirt?
Yeah, exactly. You're a disgrace.
Yeah, no.
Starting
watch
with
them all the way
episode
through.
4, A New Hope. Come
Nope.
on. That's ridiculous.
Start 1.
When my kids watch the movies with me, we're starting with episode 4, then we go 5, then we go 6.
And it's literally going to be like watching with your wife, and you're going to have to explain everything all the time.
You
And
assume
it's
a
not
lot about
worth
my
it.
wife. What if she knows a lot about Star Wars?
Maybe, but I'm just assuming.
It's the reason I married her. Anyway, are there any precautions that you know of that we should be taking as far as the lunar eclipse goes? I mean, I know that you're not supposed to stare at it with your naked
so
eyes. I get that.
For
By
what
the
it's
way,
worth,
There
for what
is
it's worth,
always something there to remind me.
I don't get
naked
it.
eyes. No, okay,
No.
never mind.
So for what it's worth, I was a student teacher at a local college for the astronomy class. So
Cool.
I'm not exactly your run-of-the-mill amateur on this. Okay, I really am, but so
Hit us
no,
with your knowledge.
don't look at it. No, don't think sunglasses are going to help.
Yeah, that's not enough.
And if you're trying to take pictures with your cell phone, it's not going to work out. You need to actually, so don't buy solar eclipse sunglasses off of Amazon because there's about a 90% chance you're getting terrible glasses that are going to burn your eyeballs and you hurt your retinas and you could do some serious damage.
So where should we go if we actually want to look at this thing?
You need to go find some register. They're going to be about $3 a pair, not 50
Fine by me.
cents.
It's worth it.
Yeah, so go buy the $3 pair of Eclipse viewers. They've got the little like seal of certificate from NASA and something else on there that lets you know they're pretty real. And if you put them on regular time, it should be like looking through an X-ray film. Like that would be the best thing. Like, oh, these are pretty real because I can't see much right now.
That's what I'm worried about. Are people like doing idiotic things like standing there with their phones, and trying to take a selfie with the lunar eclipse?
Right. So here's the pro tip of the day. If you are going to use your cell phone to take a picture of the eclipse, put your eclipse glasses, put that over the lens on the back of your iPhone, then take the picture. It'll work. It'll be awesome. There you go.
Brian's a pro. I like that about you,
Pro.
Brian. Way to go,
Super
buddy.
nerd.
I like it. I like it a lot, except for the fact that you thought it was. Never mind.
I can also figure out the mass of a planet depending on the wobble of the stars it passes through.
I like it.
Just saying.
I like it. And one of the reasons we succeed at fantasy football, the two of us, because we're numbers geeks too. So
Have a big calculator.
there is that as well. Yes, bigger than most. Heard the average is about 6 inches.
That's a pocket calculator.
Couple minutes left in this segment, Brian. Anything of note that you want to bring up aside from what we've already discussed here?
What did I say? It's like your wife should apologize, but she doesn't. So that was my apology thing. That's always there.
A wife should apologize but doesn't?
Yeah.
See, because she always wins. She always wins.
Yeah, it's like whatever.
You got married. You know what you're
Yeah,
getting
that
into.
text is coming around here pretty soon.
There you go, buddy.
I ain't apologizing for it.
What was the hype thing you were talking about?
Just overhyping stuff, just in general.
Oh, man. Can I just say this real quick? I am a contrarian when it comes to, like, fads. If everybody seems to be on board with something, I love to take the opposite angle and be a contrarian.
I just don't get excited about much anymore. I think that's my problem, unless it's money. Money I get excited about.
Good motivator.
Money, yeah. Other than that, I'm just kind of like, this is overhyped, especially food. And here's my thing.
Ooh, contentious.
So I don't go like,
Controversy.
oh my God, this is like the best barbecue place on the planet. Because in reality, it's not. And to me, it's either good or it's bad.
Right.
Some things are really good, but it's not like, oh my God, this is the greatest, because I think mine is the best. Because when you go to a restaurant, you go to a championship barbecue restaurant, probably burning a sponsor here or something.
Smokey
It's been
D's.
sitting there for a long time. It's not fresh. It's not fresh. Stop kidding yourselves. So when you cut a brisket, it's been sitting there for an hour, just kind of relaxing a little bit, and you cut it and you eat it straight off like that. Such an incredible difference. And I'm not a guru. I use just regular beef rub from the supermarket.
You ever done whole hog roast before?
No.
Oh, Brian.
Pork is not in my family.
Oh, that's
here.
right. You said that earlier. But the thing about that is, because I have done several hog roasts, man, I love the fact that thing was just oinking a couple hours ago.
Yeah.
The taste is different. You do notice a difference.
Pork is terrible for you.
I don't know what that means. I'm sorry. I love pork. Always have.
Terrible.
Always
I love
will.
bacon. I can't wait for Bacon Fest.
Yeah, bacon's good. Yeah,
I'm going to
beef
reach
is
out
good.
to
Chicken's good.
Yeah. So if
Turkey.
Marshall out there is listening, Bacon Fest sponsor now.
Well, I can talk to my friend Brooks. Who
Yeah,
kinda
Brooks too.
has something to do with it.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll talk to him. No question. All right. Well, this has been a great show, Brian. We'll do it again next week. Thank you for your time. And thank you to everybody listening to our fine program. A big thanks to Bob Harris of the Football Diehards for being a special guest earlier in the show. You missed any part of it, you can always go back and listen via Apple Podcasts and Google Play. And thank you for listening. For Brian Eikenberry, I'm Andy Hall. This is 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio.